Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, ready to dive into the big Friday slate over at DraftKings for NBA DFS. The main slate, if I wasn't specific enough, the goal is to help you with your process, hopefully point you to some plays that perhaps you were not on, or just allow you to double down on the ones you already did. We'll take a look at player projections, matchups, and of course, player ownerships, courtesy of rotogrinders.com's projections. If this helps you out in any way, please smash that like button and also consider subscribing to the channel. Doing so obviously puts you in a growing community and also alerts you to future videos just like this. So let's get to it. Let's go position by position, starting with point guard. Obviously, the big news of the slate is no Luka Doncic. He is out, so Kyrie Irving does look really good, but he is not the best projecting point guard of the slate. It is actually James Harden coming in with a 50-point fantasy projection, and he figures to be the chalkiest point guard of the slate right now. That is true, just ahead of Fred VanVleet. Fred VanVleet is the far better value, but nonetheless, Harden looks really good against the Kings. He just has monster usage, and that was the case anyways. But now that Norman Powell is out for the second straight game, Harden's too cheap at 9.3K. So only real issue with Harden is that the Kings are not exactly the softest matchup by the numbers. They're actually per DK scoring, they're fourth against point guards. So it's, De'Aaron Fox is a good defender. So it's not like it's the best draw ever. But Harden's role is probably enough to get me interested. The only issue at all is that he's going to be owned. So there are a lot of good point guards on this slate, and one in particular that I like. So I do not mind pivoting away from him if I don't want to, eat all that chalk. So Kyrie Irving is probably not going to be the chalk because he's almost 10K. DK definitely adjusted to the Luka news. And Irving is priced way, way up. So while he's probably going to smash with no Luka, and definitely he has a ceiling and all that. I don't know if I really want to pay 10K for Kyrie Irving. He is naturally a pretty score independent player and a little bit inconsistent in general. So I think getting exposure to the Mavs overall is not a bad idea. And if you want to play Kyrie, the floor is pretty good and the ceiling is there. And it looks like he's not going to be owned. So I think as for a tournament play, Kyrie is pretty interesting. Is he a core play? I don't think so. Not at that price. I think the better play than Kyrie and James Harden is probably going to be Trae Young. He is cheaper than both of them, and he's actually coming in at half the ownership of Harden. He has a matchup with the Bulls, which is one of the best matchups you can ask for. And it's just a very, very fast-paced game with the Hawks and Bulls here. No defense on either side. So I really like this game across the board. 27.5 total and a 1.5 point spread. It's disgusting in a good way. So Trae Young looks awesome. He's my favorite point guard spend on the slate. You can also look to Steph Curry, $100 cheaper. He just projects for way fewer minutes. And there's it's a very likely blowout against the shorthanded Pelicans. You also have Dame at 8.9K. I don't mind him at all. The price is decent. The Pacers are a pretty good matchup and pretty good DFS environment. But again, if I'm going to be paying up that way, I think I'm just going to go for Trae. I just think he has a better floor and ceiling. And Dame still has Giannis just eating up usage. So I just don't love playing Dame unless Giannis is out. It's just the way I roll. The only other guy who's even projecting for over 40 fantasy points is going to be De'Aaron Fox. The matchup with the Clippers is not that fun. He is 9.4K after just going absolutely bonkers the last few games. He did come back down to earth a little bit last time with only 46 fantasy points only. But he's been really, really good. He's exhibited quite a ceiling. Let me just check the status of Sabonis. Sabonis is healthy and fine, so I don't think we can really take advantage of that like we could have before. So Fox is in play. He projects okay. I don't think he's gonna, nobody's gonna be on him at all. So for a tournament play, he's okay, but just not a priority for me. So as far as the big spends go, I do like Harden. I don't have a problem with him, but if he's gonna be chalky, I'm gonna pivot to Young at lower ownership. I don't mind Kyrie for tourneys. And that's probably it for the really expensive guys. I think I would probably look to go more the mid-range beyond that. And luckily, Fred VanVleet looks really, really good, pushing for a 40-point fantasy projection, only 7.2K against the Blazers, which is a great matchup. The risk here obviously would be that the Rockets are just going to completely destroy them. And rightfully so. I think Anthony Simons is out. He's questionable. Jeremy Grant's questionable. DeAndre Ayton's questionable. So Portland could be a source of value. but that game is not a great bet to stay close. That said, Fred VanVleet remains really good value. So if you want to drop down and get pretty good production out of a guy about 7K, that's not bad. Jamal Murray is way overpriced if Nikola Jokic is back. He is still questionable. He's missed a couple of games due to personal reasons, so monitor that. I think at 8.6, he is okay if Jokic is out, but he is no longer a priority for me. He's not a core play at that price just because there's so many other good plays too. And he does not presently project very well. So he is off my radar unless Jokic is out, and probably even if he is. Derek White is an okay play against the Wizards. That game is probably going to blow out, but it's a great matchup. So if you want to play White or any other Celtics player, you absolutely can, just because they can definitely get there in 3 quarters. I don't have a problem with him. He's just not a priority. The other guy that does kind of stand out in the mid-range for me is 6.5K Jared McCain. His projection is not amazing, but his minutes are. He's projecting for 36 minutes. Joel Embiid is questionable with a knee injury. And Paul George has already been ruled out. So Tyrese Maxey is back. So that kind of lowers the excitement level a little bit. But with Paul George not there, I think McCain looks decent at 6.5K, and he's not going to carry too much ownership. So I think he's a solid play. I think if Embiid was randomly ruled out too, then McCain would look really good at 6.5K. So keep an eye on that situation. Dyson Daniels at 6.K would normally be out of play based off of price. But the matchup with the Bulls is so good that I don't mind it in tournaments. He's not going to be owned because of the price, but he projects okay. And honestly, anytime you have a situation where you're facing the Bulls or the Hawks and you get a guy that's not going to be owned, I'm just going to automatically think, well, that projection's too low. He could definitely smash it. And on steals alone, he can get there. The guy has been absurd all year. Just was he averaging 3 steals a game? Just absolutely disgusting stuff. So he's going to get big minutes as long as the game stays close. He can get threes, he can get assists, he can get a lot of steals, he can even block shots. He does it all. So he looks kind of overlooked and kind of undervalued for the situation he's in. Now, is he a little bit expensive in a vacuum at 6.8K? Absolutely he is, and that's why he's not going to be owned. But due to the game environment and what he's capable of, I do like him for tourneys. Staying in that same game, Josh Giddey at 6K flat. He's okay. There's no Lonzo Ball, and Kobe White is questionable. No, he's probable now. Never mind. So he's in. But Patrick Williams is out and Lonzo Ball is out. So there are a few minutes to go around. I think Josh Giddey at 6K flat is in play in this matchup. His minutes are all over the place, but we know he is a things doer. He does a lot when he's out there. So he's fine. I think I prefer Ayo Dosunmu at point guard, though. He's going to get 30 minutes off the bench with those guys out. That role is pretty solidified. And Kobe White at 6.8 is totally fine in that matchup, too. I just think basically anybody in this Hawks Bulls game, as long as they're not priced out like egregiously, they're going to be on my radar for sure. So Houston is not a fun draw, but Shannon Sharp at 5.7K with the minutes and upside he possesses right now with Anthony Simons out. He's very interesting at point guard as well. Let me just double check we don't know for sure what's going on with the Blazers. So Simons is officially questionable. DeAndre Ayton's doubtful, so we can look at Portland bigs for value for sure. And Jeremy Grant is questionable. Even Scoot Henderson is questionable. So there's a pretty good chance that Shannon Sharp at 5.7 is one of the better value plays of the slate. And we probably just in general can look to Portland for value. And they're possibly going to be so shorthanded that we don't really need to worry on the Portland side about the blowout risk. I'd be more worried about the Rockets guys not fully getting there with the game possibly not staying close. Not really going to get to Tyrese Maxey yet. Nice price at 8.4K. Nice matchup with the Nets. Minutes are just not there yet. Projection is just not there yet. I'm not going to do it. Not going to play Jordan Poole against Boston. Good price, good roll. Terrible matchup. I just don't want to do it. Anytime I say something like that, you can still play whoever you want just because it's a tournament. I mean, Joel Embiid was restricted still like the other day when he played and he smashed. So you can still do that. Like literally, Taylor and I were talking about the Raptors against the Timberwolves. We're saying the Raptors were a total fade for us. And that logic made sense. But guess what happened? The Raptors won that game and RJ Barrett smashed. So You can always pick your spots and go against the grain if you'd like, but logically speaking, those aren't plays that are priorities, especially on a bigger slate like this. It's just not something I'm going to do. Drew Holiday at 5.3K against the Wizards. Probably not going to play a lot. Probably going to only play 3/4 in a blowout. But when he's out there, he's probably going to rack up some solid stats and a really good matchup. I don't have a problem with him whatsoever. I think based off of price, I think he's a little bit more fun than Derek White. But he's an older dude. So if the game gets out of hand, who are the first guys to exit the game? Him and Al Horford, right? So I don't feel amazing about it, but I do like the price and the matchup without a doubt. Simons, if he's in at 6.2K, is okay, especially with all the other Portland guys out. He'd have monster usage, but I don't trust it. I don't really want to play him whatsoever. I'd rather just play the other Portland values that are going to open up here. Kevin Porter Jr. continues to have a role. He's smashed, but he only had like 20 minutes last time, so I'm a little bit weary of playing him. But he's too cheap. He's 4.2K. Solid DFS environment against the Kings. No Norm Powell. Everything looks okay there. I don't have a problem with it. While I'm not super excited to go pay for Kyrie Irving, I did mention we might want some exposure to Dallas. And one way to get that is going to be looking at their other guards. So Jaden Hardy at 3.9K. He could push for 20, 25 minutes here. I think he's an okay value. I say only okay because, number one, I don't know if he's starting. And number two, he's very scoring dependent and sometimes doesn't even score. So you need him to come out and score 15 plus points, like real points to deliver. And I don't feel super confident in that. It's not like Denver is a cakewalk matchup, especially on the road. But he's there. And at 3.9K, if he starts, I would definitely consider him. And he's still in play, even if he doesn't start, just a little bit more volatile. So yeah, I think that's probably about it at point guard. I think if Simons is out and Scoot Henderson is in, Scoot at 5.2 is totally fine. Scoot could be a really good play if that's the case. Maybe he gets a start. Even if he doesn't, he'd be in play. If both Simons and Scoot are out, Delano Banton at 5.1K looks really interesting. All of a sudden, he'd get a lot of minutes. Whether it's off the bench or whether he starts, he'd look pretty good. I'd like him a good deal. I don't really know what to do with the Pels guys anymore. The Pels guys are just ridiculous. Elfrid Payton is now in the player pool at 4.1K. He started the last game. Brandon Boston is just, I don't want to pay almost 7K for Brandon Boston. I watch him do what he did against the Cavs. The Warriors are not a good matchup. Major blowout risk yet again. So the Pels, it's just like, I'll take whoever is the cheapest that makes the most sense. And until we have starting lineups, there's no sense in really playing around with that. All right, let's kick it over to shooting guard. So Kyrie Irving can be used over there. Like I said, I'm fine with him, but I don't really want to go out of my way. Zach LaVine looks like a smash play against the Hawks. Like I said, all Bulls and Hawks guys look awesome, but they're also going to be owned. LaVine pulling 46% ownership is crazy, but it's warranted. He's only 7.4K. It's the best spot of the night, and I think he's been crushing. Let's see, where is he at? Yeah, he's been playing 30 plus minutes basically every game. The game has been close. He's had 42 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games. So, he can be kind of scoring dependent at times and a little bit more volatile, but the matchup demands that we have interest. I don't really mind if you want to fade him and stack up every other bowl and hope this, like LaVine at massive ownership busts and Vooch and Kobe and all these other bowls wreck. You could do that, but it seems like a decent chalk play to eat. 7.4K. If LaVine wasn't chalky and he wasn't facing the Hawks, I would have interest in LaVine because he's only 7.4K. He's a good play anyways, but across the board, everything points to him being a really good play. That said, anytime somebody's pushing 50% ownership, you can definitely go away from him and find somebody else, as long as there's somebody in that price range that makes sense as a pivot. Jaylen Brown will forever look solid at 8.2K against the Wizards. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Again, major blowout risk. It's still Boston against the Wizards. It's a 17-point spread. So if we're not going to get full quarters of these guys, it's just, why are we paying for them? So if you're going to do it, I would rather get discounts. And I think you're kind of getting one with Jaylen and you're getting one with Drew. So that's probably where I'd go. But not a priority for me on this slate. Brandon Ingram, terrible matchup with the Warriors. Good price, good role, solid projection. I don't have a problem with it. He's not going to be owned, so that's interesting. I think a pivot off of Jaylen Brown or spending up over Zach LaVine, I think it's fine. But looking at all these guys here at shooting guard, I would just rather play Zach LaVine. Mentioned Derek White, he's fine. Kobe White's fine. Jared McCain's okay. Prefer that Embiid be out to really fall in love with him here, but he's super okay no matter what. Kind of mentioned all these guys already. One guy that was not mentioned because he's not point guard eligible is Cam Thomas. He was out last game and Cam Johnson went off. If I would have played Cam Johnson over Peyton Watson, I would have had a takedown, but I didn't because I silly sometimes, and I just stick with my guns and play other players in certain lineups, and then it comes back to bite me. So, oh well. But moving on here, Cam Thomas is back, and at 6.9K against the Sixers with no PG-13 on the outside, he's an okay tournament play. Does not project well, and he's pushing 7K here in a not great matchup. It's basically like if Embiid is there, I don't want to target the Nets. If Embiid is out, the Sixers defense is not going to be as good, and Cam Thomas at 6.9K would be an interesting tournament play. As things stand, not so much. So I'd rather just drop down to shit on Sharp right now. Ayo Dosunmu can also be used at shooting guard. I mentioned him. He looks good. Christian Brown loses his luster if Jokic is back, but he's okay at 5.8K because he's still starting, getting good minutes. Amen Thompson, I don't know. He burned me last time. He kind of needs somebody to be out for him to really feel like a reliable option. The Pels do get an extra body back with Jordan Hawkins in this game, projecting for almost 30 minutes. The actual raw points projection here is not great, as is the case for all Pels. So not super excited about it, but he's in play. And I think that's it. I think Quentin Grimes, if he gets a start, is an okay value at 4.2K. It's probably going to be him or Jaden Hardy with Luka out. I kind of hope Grimes is the guy who starts because he actually does other things besides score, and he's actually had some good games. So I would definitely have him on my radar. If he starts, I like him a good deal. I think that's kind of it for shooting guard as far as guys that feel reasonably safe and make a lot of sense. All right, over to small forward. Jason Tatum obviously is going to look like a great play against the Wizards. He can get there in 3 quarters. He can get you 55 to 60 fantasy points in 3 quarters, no doubt about it. So if you want to take the risk and hope that he sees the 4th quarter, go for it. He's not going to be crazy owned. So I don't hate the idea of building around Boston, or in particular making Tatum your spend on this slate. Because he's not going to be super chalky and the matchup is kind of as good as it gets. So I'm okay with it, but I personally am going to gravitate towards the Hawks Bulls game instead of the Celtics. Talked about all these other guys already. DeMar DeRozan is back for the Kings. Projection is not amazing. Matchup isn't amazing, so probably not going to do it, but the price is nice. MPJ at 7.2K is out of play if Jokic is back. If Jokic is out, I like him a good deal at that price. Benedict Matherin's okay. Talked about Cam Thomas already. Trey Murphy at 5.9K. He's viable. He's going to get 30 plus minutes here. But it's not a good matchup and there is blowout risk. Tari Eason is always a decent value. His price has ticked up a little bit, so I'm not super excited to pay for him at 5.7. Klay Thompson at 5.8 is definitely in play with Luka out. Just has more usage, has a better ceiling. His minutes of projection do not look good, and the matchup at Denver is not amazing, but the price and role are fine enough to get me to take a chance on him. Bogdanovich is okay. Really don't know how many minutes he's going to get, but he is 4.7K, and the matchup is amazing. Tends to have good usage off the bench, so I don't mind it. Kevin Huerter's price has gotten a little bit ridiculous. He's priced up from when Sabonis was out, so I cannot do that at 6.3K. That's a big no thanks. I think Dylan Brooks is always a fair value. He's sub 4K now. He's going to get 30 minutes against the Blazers. I don't have a problem with it. Is he safe? No, but he's fine. The Hawks #1 overall pick. His minutes are really wonky. Tough to trust him, but he's not even 5K against the Bulls. I think he's okay, but again, not super reliable. Amir Coffey is very much on my radar. I know everybody's going to like Kevin Porter Jr., but Coffey gets more minutes, and Coffey's going to start. So I actually do prefer him as opposed to KPJ, especially if people are going to own Porter again after looking at how he did last time. He only played 20 minutes, so I want the minutes. And Coffey has played well, so he's one of my favorite values on the board as things stand. You can always take a shot on Boston values. Sam Hauser at 3.5K is interesting if the game does blow out. And just obviously, it's just a good matchup. If he only plays 15, 20 minutes anyways off the bench, he could just come out there and hit like 8 threes and pan out. You could always take a shot at that price for sure. That's probably going to be it for me at small forward. Obviously, it just looks like you're using Levine at shooting guard or small forward, and then you can kind of make a decision from there. But I like Amir Coffey at small forward and Levine at shooting guard at the moment. So up top is Giannis. Very expensive, 12.1K. Very good projection, 61 fantasy points. I believe it's the top projection of the slate. No, Jokic is the top if he's in. Right now I'm preferring Jokic because Jokic is got a better projection, and actually I don't even know. I guess I would prefer Giannis. It's tough. Jokic has got a better projection, but he's missed some time. And Dallas is not actually the best matchup. I think the Pacers are a better draw. So, yeah, I think I'm leaning Giannis here, especially since he's half the ownership for some reason. It's a little bit surprising, honestly. But Giannis looks good. I think the only issue is, Tatum is a lot cheaper and projects kind of close to Giannis in a better spot. So while I don't really want to prioritize guys in a likely blowout, I don't think we can be afraid of blowouts that much to the point where we're ignoring an obvious price discrepancy that could benefit us. That said, Giannis looks amazing. If you want to build around Giannis at under 10% ownership, that's very, very appealing. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. The Pacers always play the Bucks well, so I anticipate that game being close and high scoring. So I would imagine Giannis has a pretty good chance of delivering on his projection and then some. The only question is going to be, do you feel comfortable with the value provided on this slate to build around him? Once again, Tatum, play him if you feel good about Boston playing 4 quarters. And you can play him anyways, and he'll probably get right around that projection. Can he hit the ceiling that like Giannis or Jokic could possibly hit on this slate at 10.4K with the game blowing out? I don't know. Jalen Johnson, really good price, really good projection, great matchup with the Bulls. Like, honestly, can we just stack up the entire Hawks Bulls game? I kind of want to. I think it's going to hit. I think it's going to deliver. I think there's a lot of good plays. I think we can stack it. It just feels like a very obvious stack, spot that like, why not do it? Especially if it's not going to be like crazy owned. Like right now, Jalen Johnson is not very owned. He is a really, really good play. I like him quite a bit. He's probably my favorite power forward play when you look at points per dollar here. And just sheer floor and upside and matchup, like minutes and projection, everything looks really, really good. I feel like his projection is actually pretty light. We know he's capable of more than that, especially in a spot like this. So he's probably my favorite power forward as things stand. Siakam against the Bucks is totally fine. 7.2. Don't mind if you land there. I mentioned DeMar. I think I'd prefer Siakam for sure. I'd prefer Jalen Johnson for sure too. DeMar is just not really on my radar. So cue the 40-point outing, right? Kyle Kuzma seems like he's been limited, so I'm not really going to play him at 6.6K. PJ Washington smashed 2 games ago in just 28 minutes. If he's not limited and he can play, I like him actually a good deal at 6K with no Luka. Right now he's projecting for 30 minutes and his actual fantasy projection is just okay. And he's also not going to be owned. I don't mind if he gets 30 minutes at this price with an expanded role. I think it's okay. I think there's better values, but I don't mind taking a shot on that in some tournament lineups for sure. Robert Williams continues to get run. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton is doubtful, so Robert Williams and Donovan Clingan are going to be splitting the center minutes at 4.8K. We can do that, 25 plus minutes here in this matchup, and he's probably going to be coming off the bench, so he would be blowout proof in that regard to some degree. But both of them look good. We'll talk about Clingan in a second, but Robert Williams has been pretty darn good for Portland. Let's see. Yeah, 4.8K, 29 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games. He had a huge 46-point fantasy outing. He's been only getting 25 minutes every game, so we cannot really expect much more than that, but he does a lot when he's out there. So at under 5K, I'm okay with that. Not a smash priority. He is kind of chalky. So if you can find a pivot that you really, really like, I would certainly entertain it, just because, you better get it done in 25 minutes if that's all you're going to get. And it's just never a given, especially, Rockets are not an easy matchup at all. So don't mind him, but I don't need to make him a priority like the ownership is suggesting just yet. DeAndre Hunter could be cheap. Exposure to the Hawks Bulls game. Not crazy minutes, but he's also only 5.1K. I don't mind it. Keegan Murray's way too expensive for when Sabonis was out. I would need Sabonis out to like Kevin Huerter or Keegan. I don't even think I'd play either of them, even if he was out. I would maybe play De'Aaron Fox, but I don't think those guys are just priced up too much. Alexander Sarr is very inconsistent, has major issues with fouls in his shot, but he's going to get 25 to 30 minutes. I don't really want to do it, but he is 5.3K. I don't think the price is bad. I think it's okay. Peyton Watson is, let's see, Aaron Gordon is still out. So yeah, Peyton Watson's still okay at 5.3. I don't mind him at all. Still projects for about 30 minutes. I think his actual fantasy projection feels a little bit low. So Jokic being back would obviously hurt him a little bit, but I think he's okay. I think he's solid value. I prefer him over Sarr or Kuminga or DeAndre Hunter, like any of these other guys I said. I think he's actually a pretty good pivot away from Robert Williams. You pay $500 more, you get a few more minutes of play. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good pivot in tourneys. I already said Amir Coffey. You can play him at small forward, power forward, or forward if you want. 4K flat for a guy who's going to start and play 30-plus minutes. I like that a lot. I like him as a leverage on KPJ or just in general. You can play them both if you want to. They're going to play a decent amount and get solid usage. I just prefer Coffey. Nobody else really feels that great. Torrey Craig is there for 4.5K. With Patrick Williams out, he could have a role, but I really prefer Torrey Craig when he's like 3.1K. He's not really an offensive guy, so he really needs to hit his shots or he needs to rack up a ton of defensive stats. Otherwise, it's going to be a bust. Yeah, it's probably going to do it for them. Honestly, the other things could open up. It's only 242 Central, so what? Sorry about that. I had to stop it for a second. But yeah, so on to center. Oh, what I was going to say was, it's a big slate. It's a little bit early yet. There's things that can happen. Obviously, Jokic could be ruled out, and Embiid could still be ruled out. There's always some random dude who ends up being ruled out that we never saw coming, and you just have to adjust to it. So it is what it is. Kicking over center, if Jokic plays, he looks great. Best projection of the slate. He's carrying ownership at 16%, but not crazy ownership, so we can definitely play him and not worry too much about that. But if he's going to be that owned, I would prefer Giannis at half the ownership and a similar projection. His matchup is better by the numbers, and he's been crushing. So I think if that were to flip, I would go with a Jokic, and that'd be fine. But at this point, I think Giannis is the preferred play. Joel Embiid is viable at 10.1K against the Nets. Good projection. Price is not egregious. He's 2,000 cheaper than those guys. I don't really trust him yet, though. I mean, he had 56 fantasy points in 35 minutes his last game. I think if we can feel good about him playing 35 minutes, then he's on the board and we can definitely play him at that price and like no ownership. But he's questionable too. So like, is he going to be limited? Is he going to get hurt? Is he going to be, just not as effective? I don't know. It's just Embiid just feels like a risky play right now. But for tournaments, I think not expensive enough if he's going to play 35 minutes. Projection is good, not very owned. I think he is interesting in tournaments as a play away from, Jokic and Giannis, who are currently soaking up 23% of the ownership. And he's a pay up over the chalkiest center on the board, which is Şengün. I love Şengün on the slate, chalk aside. He's way too cheap at 8.4K. The matchup with the Blazers is going to be amazing. He's coming at almost 50-point fantasy projection. He will be very owned, but for good reason. So you can slide Giannis to the power forward. You can play Jokic at the utility. I think Şengün is the play of the day at center. Vooch looks really good, though. 600 cheaper for 43-point fantasy projection. Again, Hawks, Bulls. We can really stack up the entire game and feel fairly good about it. All the plays look good. So I don't mind doing that, jumping away from the Şengün ownership and playing Vooch or pairing them. They both look really good, and neither of them are over 8.4K, so that's pretty cool. Zubac will be needed against Sabonis, so at 7.2K, he's a little bit too cheap. He looks solid. Miles Turner is a lot less money and projects almost as well. He's probably the better play against the Bucks, but both are viable. I don't really want to play Sabonis at 10K against the Clippers. It's not a fun matchup on the road against Zubac. I think he's fine. You can play Sabonis. He's just not a priority. I'd rather his projection be a lot better than that. Clint Capella in that Hawks Bulls game. Minutes are not very reliable, but the matchup is good, so I don't hate it at 5.3. Not really in love with Brook Lopez or Draymond Green. Brook Lopez, his minutes are really high for the projection. I mean, Chris Middleton's still out, I guess. I don't know. Why are his minutes so high? Let's see. Where was he doing lately? He's been playing monster minutes. That's crazy. I mean, based off of minutes and matchup, Brook Lopez is kind of interesting. 35, 40, 30, 40, 37. He is out there all game, basically, for some of these games. So, hey, if Brook Lopez is really going to play that much and not going to be owned, I think Brook Lopez is really interesting at 6K. Already talked about Robert Williams. Al Horford, in theory, is fine if he's actually going to play against the Wizards and not be limited or benched early. It feels risky, but he is cheap. He should push for about 30 minutes, and obviously no Porzingis still. So you can do that if you want. Let's see. Yeah, Klingon I mentioned. Same with Robert Williams, going to split. It can be like 23, 25 minutes or so. Good point per minute guy, only 4.4K. I think I might prefer him as a pivot away from a chalkier Robert Williams. Both are in play. I would not play them together. Both have low floors, high ceilings. So I think I just play Klingon just because he's a little bit cheaper and not going to be his own. I think that does. I mean, Andre Drummond at 5K is viable for sure if Embiid is out. If he's in, I don't want to go there. But if he's out, I'd imagine he'd push for about 26 to 30 minutes. And he's a great points per minute guy, and the Nets are a good matchup. So if Embiid is out, Embiid at 5K is very, very interesting. Yeah, Vasily has been doing really well off the bench. He also would have a role if Embiid is out, and we know PJ13 is already out. So at 3.6K, he would be kind of interesting as well. All right, so nobody else is going to really pop right now because we don't have like a ton of news. So for overall strategy, it's kind of simple for me. I mean, some of the chalk I'm just going to eat. Like Şengün at center looks amazing. I know he's 32% owned, but he just projects really well. It's a really good matchup. I'm just going to hope that the game stays reasonably close. I want to attack the Hawks Bulls game for sure. I have a lot of interest in Trae Young being my most expensive player of the slate. I like Trae Young. I like Vooch. I like Levine. I like Jalen Johnson. All those guys look really, really good. And it's just going to depend on the value, like what value plays are there that I feel good about that allow me to get to those guys. It's a pretty big slate. We do have Jokic and Giannis, but those are the only two guys. Like there's no Luka here either. So those are the only two guys where I'd say, yeah, I want to pay for them. But right now, the only one I would pay for is Giannis. If he's going to be half as owned as Jokic and have a similar projection and a better matchup, he looks like the better stud. You can play either of them if you'd like. But my personal strategy for the slate is probably to not play either of them. I'm probably going to go for a more balanced build. Right now, the value down low does not feel that good. And I don't think I have to get a crazy amount of value to get a lot of pieces to this Hawks Bulls game that I'm very, very interested in. All right, so that is going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you in some way. If it does, smash that like button and also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.